5 July 1943. Southern face of the Kursk salient, sector of the 6th Guards Army, near Tamarovka and Bykovo. Soviet situation maps of the Kursk salient list forces in the language of industrial war. Around 1.9 million men, nearly 3,600 tanks and self-propelled guns in the defending fronts, and close to 2,800 aircraft. Opposite them, German reports show some 770 to 780,000 men, and about 2,400 to 2,500 tanks and assault guns committed to what Hitler describes as a decisive battle. On those same Soviet documents, buried among artillery and minefield data, appears a short entry. In the sector of the 6th Guards Army, a platoon of 16 anti-tank dogs is credited with disabling 12 German tanks that have broken into the depth of the defense near Tamarovka and Bykovo. The question is simple. In a battle fought by almost 6,000 armored vehicles, how did a handful of explosive-carrying dogs still leave a measurable trace in the official record? The film opens on the 1924 Revolutionary Military Council order authorizing military use of dogs. Training photographs appear. German shepherds and mixed breeds moving through obstacle courses. Handlers in greatcoats giving commands in winter fields. Tables list roles across 6 categories. Rescue work in shelled zones, communication runners carrying messages between trenches, mine detection, transport of ammunition and supplies on sleds, guard duties at depots and headquarters, and a final category marked simply special tasks. In the early 1920s, Soviet military theorists see dogs as support assets that increase mobility and communication across vast fronts where radios remain scarce and roads turn to mud. Directives describe dogs as assistants to the Red Army fighter, tools that enhance but do not replace human soldiers. The expectation is straightforward. Dogs will make infantry divisions more flexible, especially in winter and forest terrain where mechanization struggles. Reality develops differently. By the mid-1930s, internal reports from OSOAVIA-Kim, the Society for the Assistance of Defense, Aviation and Chemical Construction, and Red Army dog schools show an expanding system of specialized training. One branch grows in particular. Destruction dogs, trained to attack specific targets and carry explosive charges toward enemy positions. The shift is documented in training manuals that begin listing demolition techniques alongside traditional support roles. The institutional foundation is substantial. At least a dozen schools operate across the Soviet Union by 1935, stretching from Moscow Oblast to Ukraine and Central Asia. 3 of these schools eventually specialize in anti-tank work. Records suggest tens of thousands of dogs are mobilized across all roles during the coming war years. Later Soviet figures claim more than 40,000 dogs served in wartime roles, with estimates reaching 60 to 70,000 over the entire conflict. This vast network of training centers, handlers, and veterinary support creates the organizational capacity for experiments that would be impossible in smaller armies. The bureaucratic momentum builds. Dogs already appear on army rosters as messengers and mine detectors. Adding a new category, anti-tank specialist, requires only administrative approval, not a fundamental change in doctrine. The decision to formalize this role comes in 1935, when anti-tank dog units are officially included in the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army. A simple directive appears in staff files. Anti-tank dog units are authorized as standard formations within rifle divisions. The logic seems clear: dogs are cheap, mobile, and require no fuel. In an army preparing for mechanized warfare but lacking sufficient anti-tank guns, they represent a low-cost solution to a growing problem. But the directive raises a question that will echo through the next 8 years. How does a support animal, bred and trained to assist human soldiers, become a formally recognized anti-tank weapon designed to die on its first mission? Training reports from this period survive in translated form, offering a window into early experiments. Documents describe trials at proving grounds outside Moscow. Dogs carrying dummy bombs toward fixed wooden targets painted to resemble tanks. Diagrams show canvas harnesses fitted with release mechanisms. The test protocols are methodical. Dogs run predetermined courses. Handlers record success rates. Engineers refine equipment. The original concept imagines a reusable demolition dog. In staff proposals, the animal is supposed to run to a specific bunker or stationary tank, drop a timed or remotely detonated charge at the base, then return to the handler for another sortie. The vision is tactical flexibility. One well-trained dog completing multiple missions per battle, conserving both animals and explosives while keeping handlers at safe distance. Test results contradict the theory. Reports state that dogs can manage single, unchanging targets under controlled conditions. But when target type changes, from a wooden mock-up to an actual tank hull, or when location shifts even slightly, the animals become confused. Some dogs complete their approach but fail to trigger release mechanisms. Others circle the target without depositing charges. A disturbing pattern emerges. Dogs carrying live charges sometimes return directly to handlers, creating what reports describe as an unacceptable safety risk. One summary notes 3 separate incidents where returning dogs with armed explosives caused injuries among training staff. The solution is documented in technical manuals dated 1939 and 1940. Engineers abandon the drop-and-return concept entirely. The new configuration is simpler and grimmer. 10 to 12 kilograms of TNT packed in 2 canvas pouches strapped to the dog's back, with a wooden lever projecting roughly 20 centimeters upward from the harness. When the dog runs beneath a tank, the lever strikes the vehicle's belly and triggers an impact fuse. The explosion occurs immediately, directly under the target's thinnest armor. The 1942 instructions on using anti-tank dogs in various types of combat codifies the system. The manual states, "The main method of destroying tanks is by releasing the dog from cover at a range of up to 200 meters from the enemy tank. A second passage adds precision. If correctly used at a close range of 100 to 150 meters, the anti-tank dog is an effective weapon for the destruction of enemy tanks." The technical shift solves the safety problem. Dogs no longer return with live charges, but introduces a moral one. Each animal becomes a single-use munition. The doctrinal decision is clear in its implications. Soviet planners have chosen to treat dogs as expendable anti-tank mines that walk, think, and follow commands until the moment of detonation. By 1940, the Red Army possesses complete doctrine for dog mines. Harnesses are standardized. Explosive loads are calculated. Training protocols exist. Tables of organization show where dog units fit within division structures. Yet all of this remains theoretical. The weapon exists on paper, in training grounds, and in staff files. No actual combat statistics exist. No after-action reports confirm effectiveness. The gap between theory and reality waits to be measured in German tank steel and Soviet dog blood. Training photographs from this period show the conditioning process. Dogs are photographed near trenches, moving between mock tank silhouettes, and waiting in holding pens near practice grounds. The methodology is behaviorist and deliberate. Dogs are kept hungry, then fed beneath parked tanks with engines idling. Blank shots are fired nearby to condition them to battlefield noise. The goal is to create an association. Tank equals food, tank equals safety, tank equals the solution to hunger. Instructors assume that any tank is primarily defined by 3 sensory markers: noise from the engine, vibration transmitted through the ground, and the basic shape of a large metal vehicle. The conditioning theory holds that once a dog learns these associations, it will search for any tank under battlefield conditions, treating German armor as equivalent to the Soviet training vehicles it knows. Later analysis, both Soviet and Western, will question this assumption. Post-war commentaries note that most Soviet tanks, the T-34 and KV series, use diesel engines while German panzers run on gasoline. The olfactory signature differs significantly. Some accounts argue that training on diesel-powered Soviet tanks created a scent association that failed to transfer to gasoline-powered German vehicles, reducing effectiveness in combat. The original 1939 through 1941 instructions, however, mention nothing about fuel type or smell. The focus remains on noise, vibration, and visual recognition. The 1942 instructions provide organizational details. A standard anti-tank dog company consists of 81 dogs divided into 3 platoons of 27 animals each. Each platoon splits further into 3 squads of 9 dogs. The structure mirrors rifle company organization, making dog units easy to integrate into existing division hierarchies. Doctrine specifies that dog platoons must be removed from frontline positions every 10 days for retraining in rear areas. Continuous exposure to combat stress degrades the conditioning. Dogs need regular reinforcement exercises to maintain reliability. The instructions also mandate that each division using dog units must allocate one functional tank, preferably a captured enemy vehicle, for regular training exercises. The challenge is evident. Maintaining proficiency requires ongoing access to armored vehicles, a resource already scarce in rifle divisions. One passage from the manual captures the fragility of the system. Anti-tank dogs work precisely and flawlessly only if the dogs are systematically trained and correctly fed. The sentence implies what field experience will confirm, that hunger, fear, inconsistent handling, or interrupted training can break the conditioning entirely. By June 1941, anti-tank dog units appear on Red Army rolls across multiple fronts. Training schools have graduated hundreds of handlers. Thousands of dogs have completed conditioning programs. The bureaucratic machinery is ready. Harnesses are stockpiled. Explosive charges wait in arsenals. Doctrine is printed and distributed. But Operation Barbarossa, Germany's invasion of the Soviet Union, is about to begin. The anti-tank dog program faces its first combat test with not a single proven success to justify its existence. The first operational deployment involves 30 dogs and 40 handlers attached to a rifle division somewhere on the western or southwestern front. Exact unit identification varies across sources, but the timing is consistent. Late summer 1941, during the desperate weeks when German armored spearheads are breaking through Soviet defenses across a 1,000-kilometer front. Staff covering notes accompany the deployment. These documents draw on pre-war doctrine, describing anti-tank dogs as an effective weapon at close range, meant to cover defensive gaps where anti-tank guns are insufficient or destroyed. The expectation is tactical. Dogs will ambush German tanks in approach routes, buying time for Soviet infantry to reposition or for artillery to register targets. Reality arrives with German armor. Under actual fire, many dogs refuse to run beneath moving tanks. The animals are conditioned to approach stationary vehicles during feeding time, not actively maneuvering firing machines. Some dogs run alongside German tanks, waiting for them to halt, and are shot by infantry escorts or machine-gunned by the tanks themselves. Others panic at the sound of main gun fire, far louder than training blanks, and flee back toward Soviet trenches. The worst cases are documented in multiple sources. Dogs returning to Soviet lines still carry armed charges. The impact fuses trigger when animals dive into trenches or collide with personnel. Casualties occur. One report fragment mentions 6 dogs exploding among Soviet soldiers during this initial series of actions. Another notes that only about 4 German tanks are successfully hit across all engagements involving the 30-dog detachment. The numbers define the disaster. Rough accounting. For enemy tanks damaged or destroyed, 6 friendly casualties from premature detonations, 20-plus dogs killed by German fire or destroyed by their own handlers to prevent return charges. The cost-benefit ratio is catastrophic. German forces respond quickly. Propaganda photographs appear within weeks, showing German soldiers examining captured dogs wearing explosive harnesses. Captions mock the Hundeminen, mine dogs, as evidence of Soviet desperation and cruelty. The images circulate through Wehrmacht units, intelligence summaries, and eventually German newsreels. The concept spreads faster than the actual deployment. Soviet after-action reports from autumn 1941 catalog the problems with bureaucratic precision. Dogs returned to trenches. Dogs refused to approach moving tanks. Dogs required destruction by handlers to prevent friendly fire incidents. One summary line appears in multiple documents. Trainers were forced to shoot returning animals. Orders follow. Informal at first, then codified in written instructions. Handlers are authorized and expected to shoot any dog that turns back toward Soviet lines after release. The policy aims to prevent friendly casualties but destroys handler morale. Volunteering for anti-tank dog units becomes unpopular. Replacements grow difficult to find. The program, barely begun, faces institutional collapse. The first deployment ends with a paradox documented in multiple archives. More Soviet personnel and dogs die from their own explosive charges than German tanks are damaged. Yet the program is not cancelled. Instead, it expands. Minutes from wartime planning meetings survive in fragmentary form. The context is desperation. German forces have advanced hundreds of kilometers. Soviet tank production has not yet recovered from factory evacuations. Anti-tank gun production lags behind demand. Rifle divisions often lack dedicated anti-tank assets beyond grenades and Molotov cocktails. In this environment, Red Army commanders call for all possible means to slow the German advance. The decision to expand anti-tank dog companies follows logically from this crisis. Planners reason that even a low success rate multiplied across dozens of units and hundreds of dogs might impose meaningful delay on German armor. Dog units are cheap compared to towed anti-tank guns. They require no steel, no precision manufacturing, no complex supply chains. A dog, a harness, and 12 kilograms of TNT cost a fraction of a 45mm anti-tank gun and its ammunition. Tables show rapid reorientation of dog schools toward anti-tank tasks. Schools previously focused on messenger and detection training shift emphasis. New handler courses emphasize anti-tank doctrine. Production of explosive harnesses increases. By early 1942, at least a dozen anti-tank dog companies exist across the Eastern Front. The 1942 instructions provide the organizational template. Each company with 81 dogs and 3 platoons can theoretically cover 3/4 to 1 kilometer of front line against mass tank attacks, according to staff calculations. 2 GAZAA 1.5-ton trucks are allocated to each company for rapid movement of 1 platoon and its handlers. The doctrine places dog units directly under Army or Division command, deployable to threatened sectors within hours. Reality on the ground proves more complicated. Frontline reports describe persistent problems. Maintaining training standards becomes difficult when divisions are constantly in combat. The requirement to rotate platoons every 10 days for retraining in rear areas is frequently ignored. No commander wants to release assets during active operations. The allocation of 1 tank per division for training exercises is often impossible. Tanks are too valuable for frontline use to be spared for dog conditioning. Supply difficulties compound the challenge. Dog food competes with human rations in an army where hunger is widespread. Veterinary care is minimal. Handlers report that dogs lose conditioning rapidly under combat stress, especially when feeding schedules become irregular. The instruction manual's warning proves prophetic. Anti-tank dogs work precisely only if systematically trained and correctly fed. Both conditions are rare in divisions fighting desperate defensive actions. Psychological resistance among soldiers adds another dimension. The order to shoot returning dogs is deeply unpopular. Many handlers form bonds with their animals. Destroying a dog because it fails to commit suicide under a tank creates moral injury. Transfer requests from dog units increase. Commanders struggle to keep units at strength. Yet the program continues. Emergency conditions in late 1941 and throughout 1942 encourage retention and even expansion of dogmine units despite their mixed record. Desperate situations demand desperate measures. In sectors where rifle divisions have no tanks, no anti-tank guns, and face German armor attacks, even a theoretically effective anti-tank dog platoon offers more hope than nothing. The bureaucratic momentum, once established, proves difficult to stop. 2 actions from 1942 provide the documentary foundation for all later claims about anti-tank dog effectiveness. The first occurs near Hlukhiv, a town in northeastern Ukraine. Soviet divisional summaries from this sector record an engagement where 6 dogs are released against a German tank column. 5 German tanks are damaged or destroyed. The report provides minimal detail, no unit designations for the German force, no description of tactical circumstances, no breakdown between destroyed and merely disabled vehicles. But the claim is specific. 6 dogs, 5 tanks, 1 action. The second action occurs near Stalingrad airfield. The documentation is more substantial. An award citation and after-action report name Senior Sergeant F.E. Kryakov and describe his dogmine group's action during fighting around an airfield on Stalingrad's outskirts. Soviet sources state that Kryakov's group destroyed 13 tanks and a large group of vehicles during this engagement. The report adds a grim coda. The entire group, Kryakov, his handlers, and all the dogs died in the battle but completed their objective. Later Soviet sources, including Tank Archive's translations of wartime documents, repeat the Stalingrad claim with consistency: 13 tanks destroyed. The number becomes canonical in Soviet military literature and post-war commemorative texts. Western analysts and modern Russian historians approach it with skepticism, noting the lack of German corroborating evidence and the general pattern of inflated kill claims in wartime reporting. Still, something happened at Stalingrad airfield significant enough to generate an award citation and appear in multiple subsequent summaries. Technical context helps assess plausibility. German tanks operating around Stalingrad in 1942 include Panzer IIIH and J models, Panzer IVF and G variants, and some Czech-built 38T light tanks. All have relatively thin belly armor, 15 to 20 mm on Panzer III and IV hulls, less on the 38T. A 10 to 12 kilogram TNT charge detonating directly beneath any of these vehicles can break tracks, rupture fuel tanks, damage engines, or crack hull plates. Multiple dogs hitting a concentrated German formation in a confined area, such as an airfield approach or access road, could theoretically create a blockage of disabled vehicles that amplifies beyond the raw number of kills. The Khlukov and Stalingrad actions become the foundation of the entire anti-tank dog narrative. These are the cases cited in every subsequent Soviet publication. These are the events invoked when officers defend the program. These are the statistics repeated in post-war commemorative materials and popular articles. The problem is scale. Even accepting both claims at face value, the total across both actions is 18 damaged or destroyed tanks. Other scattered reports mention individual successes, 1 or 2 tanks hit in various sectors, but documented, named, specific claims remain rare. Later Soviet sources claim that anti-tank dogs destroyed around 300 German tanks during the war. Modern researchers, working from both Soviet and German archival materials, consider that figure heavily exaggerated. Some Western analysts suggest the true number might be closer to 50 confirmed and probable kills across the entire war. The gap between 350 is vast. One figure represents significant battlefield impact, the other represents a minor, exotic footnote. What remains certain is this: Khlukov and Stalingrad provide the core documented successes. Without them, the anti-tank dog program has almost no verifiable combat record. With them, it can claim at least modest tactical effectiveness in specific, limited circumstances. The difference between minor success and total failure often rests on 18 tanks in 2 actions across a war that destroyed thousands. German intelligence documents capture Soviet anti-tank dogs quickly. The first reports appear within weeks of initial deployments in summer 1941. German soldiers capture dogs wearing explosive harnesses, photograph them, and forward images and technical descriptions to intelligence sections. Staff officers prepare summaries describing the device. Dogs trained to run beneath tanks, carrying impact-fused charges designed to detonate against hull bottoms. The term Hundeminen, mine dogs, or Tankhund, tank dogs, appears in German military correspondence throughout 1942. Some reports treat the weapon as evidence of Soviet desperation, emphasizing the cruelty of the concept. Propaganda photographs show German soldiers examining captured dogs, with captions mocking Soviet methods. The tone in these early documents is dismissive. The Soviets are so lacking in proper anti-tank weapons that they resort to explosive animals. But tactical reality imposes different conclusions. German tank crews and infantry escorts report encounters with mine dogs. Some attacks succeed. Tanks are damaged. Crews are killed or wounded. Even failed attacks create problems. Machine guns prove ineffective against small, fast-moving targets at close range. Tank commanders cannot depress main guns enough to engage dogs already beneath the vehicle. Infantry escorts find that shooting running dogs at 50 to 100 meters requires more ammunition expenditure than desired, and wounded dogs sometimes still reach targets. Orders follow the tactical assessment. Multiple German units on the Eastern Front issue instructions to shoot any dog on sight in combat zones. The directive is blanket and absolute. Assume every dog is hostile. Assume every dog carries explosives. Engage immediately regardless of behavior or appearance. Some orders specify that village dogs, farm dogs, and strays must all be treated as potential threats when in proximity to German positions or movement routes. Documented individual perspectives vary. Otto Carius, a decorated German tank ace whose memoir is widely cited in armor histories, mentions anti-tank dogs, but states he heard about them more than he saw them. His units apparently encountered few or no dog attacks during his Eastern Front service. Other German veterans describe isolated incidents: a dog reaching a lead tank in a column, an explosion, subsequent heightened vigilance. An SS officer's memoir includes at least one passage describing a mine dog successfully hitting a tank in his unit. The psychological impact operates regardless of actual frequency. German forces must now treat all dogs as potential weapons. Village populations often keep dogs. Farms have dogs. Strays wander battlefields scavenging corpses. Under the blanket shoot-on-sight order, any of these animals becomes a target. The mental burden is small but constant. Scan for dogs, engage dogs, verify dogs are dead before approaching. Tank crews add one more item to the list of things that might kill them. Infantry escorts watch not just for anti-tank guns and mines but for running animals that might be bombs. French-language synthesis from German sources states the practical conclusion: all soldiers were ordered to shoot dogs on sight, as tank cannons were ineffective against such small and mobile targets. The sentence captures the paradox. Tank main guns, 75mm, 50mm, even 88mm weapons designed to destroy armored targets at 2,000 meters, cannot engage a 30-kilogram dog at 30 meters beneath the hull. The most powerful weapons on the battlefield are helpless against the smallest threat. The number of German tanks certainly destroyed by dogs is small. The number of dogs shot preemptively by German soldiers under standing orders is unrecorded but certainly far larger. Thousands of dogs across 3 years of Eastern Front operations are killed by German troops who never know whether any individual animal carried explosives. The anti-tank dog program's primary effect may be this: forcing the enemy to expend time, attention, and ammunition on targets that usually pose no threat, but might. Training schedules from late 1942 and early 1943 show a documented shift. Schools that previously emphasized anti-tank work begin expanding courses in mine detection, messenger duties, and sled transport. The change is not abrupt. Anti-tank training continues, but the proportion of effort declines. More handler hours go toward teaching dogs to find buried mines, carry messages between isolated units, and pull supply sleds through winter terrain. Multiple factors drive the shift. First, effectiveness. Internal reports acknowledge that anti-tank dog results are mixed at best, catastrophic at worst. The friendly fire incidents and high failure rates make the weapon unreliable. Second, alternatives. Improved anti-tank guns reach rifle divisions in greater numbers during 1943. The 45mm M42 and 57mm ZIS-2 provide more predictable anti-armor capability without the psychological and moral costs of dog mines. Third, opportunity cost. Dogs trained for mine detection save Soviet lives and speed advances. Dogs trained to die under tanks offer uncertain tactical return. Yet official and semi-official Soviet articles continue to repeat the claim that anti-tank dogs have destroyed around 300 enemy tanks across the war. The figure appears in wartime morale-building pieces, post-war unit histories, and commemorative publications. Psychology Today and War History Online both note that modern historians consider this number exaggerated, sometimes heavily. Detailed archival work suggests the true figure is a small fraction of 300, possibly 50 or fewer confirmed and probable kills. The scale of overall dog deployment is well documented. Soviet sources state that approximately 40,000 dogs served in the Red Army in all roles from 1941 through 1945. Some estimates run higher, reaching 60 to 70,000 over the full conflict. These animals work in multiple capacities: mine detection, casualty evacuation, message running, ammunition transport, sentry duty, and yes, anti-tank operations. But anti-tank dogs represent only a small subset of the total. The intensive use of mine dogs is effectively limited to 1941 through early 1943, with declining priority afterward. Post-war memory preserves the program in simplified, heroic form. A 2011 Volgograd monument bears an inscription, "To the destroyers of fascist tanks. Battle of Stalingrad 1942 through 1943, the memorial shows a German shepherd in heroic pose, facing toward an implied enemy. The language condenses complex history into a clear narrative. Soviet dogs destroyed fascist tanks at Stalingrad. The monument makes no mention of friendly fire casualties, training failures, or the moral questions inherent in the program. Later Soviet General Staff studies provide one more specific data point. During the Battle of Kursk, Operation Citadel, in the zone of the 6th Guards Army, 16 dogs are reported to have destroyed 12 tanks near Tamarovka, Bykovo, and Hill 244.5. This claim will become the prologue's central question. But it is also one of the few numerically precise success reports in the entire anti-tank dog record. Most operational summaries mention dog units' presence without providing specific kill claims. The Kursk statistic stands out precisely because it includes actual numbers. The cause and effect is clear. As more effective infantry anti-tank weapons become available throughout 1943, improved towed guns, better mines, eventually handheld shaped charge systems, dog mines are relegated to auxiliary status. Doctrine still allows their use in sectors without attached tanks, but priority shifts to other roles. By late 1943 and into 1944, anti-tank dog training is minimal. New handlers learn mine detection and transport. The explosive harnesses remain in storage, used only in specific defensive situations where no better option exists. The program does not formally end. It fades. Documents from 1944 and 1945 mention dog units but rarely specify their tasks. Post-war Soviet military literature treats anti-tank dogs as a wartime innovation that served its purpose under desperate conditions but was superseded by better weapons. The tone is respectful but distant. The innovation happened, had some success, and then became obsolete. No shame, no boasting, just historical fact recorded and filed. Soviet situation maps from early July 1943 show one of history's most elaborate defensive systems. The Kursk salient, a westward bulge in the front line roughly 200 kilometers wide and 100 kilometers deep, has been fortified with months of preparation. Intelligence warnings of German intentions arrive through multiple channels. Soviet commanders have time to build defenses in depth. The numbers define the scale. Soviet forces, approximately 1.9 million men across the Central and Voronezh fronts plus steppe front reserves. Tank and self-propelled gun strength reaches nearly 4,900 vehicles, including reserves held for counterattack. Artillery concentrations are immense. Air support totals roughly 2,800 aircraft. The defensive system stretches 30 to 35 kilometers deep in some sectors, with multiple belts of trenches, anti-tank ditches, minefields, and gun positions. German forces for Operation Citadel total roughly 770 to 780,000 men. Tank and assault gun numbers reach approximately 2,400 to 2,500 vehicles, including the new Panzer V Panther and Panzer VI Tiger heavy tanks, plus Ferdinand and Brumber assault guns. The Germans concentrate forces for breakthrough operations at relatively narrow points, aiming to rupture Soviet defenses and encircle large formations within days. The German plan assumes that massed armor, supported by new heavy tanks theoretically immune to most Soviet anti-tank guns, can achieve rapid penetration. Soviet plans assume that layered defenses, informed intelligence, and massive reserves can absorb the attack and launch devastating counteroffensives. Both sides bring industrial war logic to full expression. Hundreds of thousands of men, thousands of tanks, and meticulous planning. Within this vast framework, anti-tank dog units occupy minor positions. The 1942 instructions specify doctrinal placement in sectors without attached tank support, on flanks weakly protected by conventional anti-tank defenses, and on approaches to artillery positions, strike groups, or headquarters. The logic is gap-filling, place dogs where better weapons are absent. As German spearheads launch attacks on 5 July, they find and exploit weaknesses. No defense is perfect across such vast frontage. German armor breaks through at multiple points, especially on the southern face where 4th Panzer Army drives toward Prokhorovka. In these breakthrough sectors, Soviet commanders commit reserves, infantry, tanks, artillery, and yes, whatever anti-tank assets are available, including dog units held for exactly this purpose. The map focuses on the southern face of the salient. The sector belongs to the 6th Guards Army, commanded by Lieutenant General I.M. Chistyakov. The zone includes small villages and hills marked by elevation numbers. Tamarovka, Bykovo, Hill 244.5. On 6 or 7 July, sources vary slightly on the exact date. A German armored thrust penetrates Soviet first-line defenses in this area. The penetration is local, not a strategic breakthrough, but it threatens artillery positions and creates a gap that must be closed. A Soviet operational summary records the commitment of a dogmine platoon to this sector. According to later General Staff studies and summarizing sources, 16 dogs are released during the action. Soviet records credit these dogs with disabling 12 German tanks or armored vehicles within the penetration zone near Tamarovka, Bykovo, and Hill 244.5. The tactical situation probably resembles this. German tanks and assault guns, likely Panzer III and IV models, possibly Stu-G3 assault guns, advance along a relatively confined approach route, channeled by terrain and obstacles. Soviet defenders lack sufficient anti-tank guns in position to stop the thrust. The dog platoon represents one of few mobile anti-armor assets immediately available. Handlers release dogs at close range, within 100 to 150 meters as doctrine specifies. Multiple dogs reach targets. Explosions occur beneath German vehicles. Some tanks lose tracks, others suffer fuel tank ruptures or engine damage. A few may suffer catastrophic hull penetration. The disabled vehicles block the route, forcing the German force to halt, reorganize, and call for recovery vehicles. Combined with existing mines, artillery fire, and infantry resistance, the dog attack contributes to arresting the German thrust in this specific sector. The penetration does not expand. 6th Guards Army stabilizes the line. The overall battle continues for days, but in this local action, the mission succeeds. This is the event from the prologue. 16 dogs, 12 tanks, 1 platoon-level engagement in one small sector of the largest tank battle in history. It is a tactical success at the lowest operational level, and it becomes one of the most specific, numerically precise success claims in the entire anti-tank dog record. The Soviet operational summary from 6th Guards Army notes German tanks breaking through into the depth of the defense in the indicated area. A subsequent line, probably added during post-action compilation, records the commitment of a dogmine platoon from the division's anti-tank reserve. The language is bureaucratic and spare. Unit designation, asset type, mission, result. 16 dogs engaged. 12 enemy tanks destroyed or disabled. The expectation, based on 1942 doctrine, is that the sector relies primarily on artillery, conventional minefields, and rifle formations armed with anti-tank rifles and grenades. Anti-tank dogs are held as a mobile reserve to block breakthroughs exactly like this, situations where German armor penetrates faster than towed guns can reposition, creating a gap that must be filled immediately with whatever assets are available. The reality recorded in the summary is rare. A clear numerical claim tied to a specific date, location, and unit. Most anti-tank dog references in Soviet operational documents are vague. Dog units participated. Anti-tank dogs engaged enemy armor, without providing kill numbers. The Tamarovka, Bykovo action specifies 16 dogs in, 12 tanks credited out. This precision suggests confidence in the reporting chain and probably indicates that the action was witnessed by multiple observers, possibly including artillery forward observers or infantry officers who could verify disabled German vehicles. Technical and tactical discussion helps assess plausibility. German armored vehicles in this sector during early Kursk operations include Panzer III models armed with 50mm or short 75mm guns, Panzer IV models with long 75mm guns, and Stu-G3 assault guns also mounting 75mm weapons. All have belly armor in the 15 to 30mm range, thinnest under the engine compartment and fighting compartment floors. A 12-kilogram TNT charge detonating in direct contact can penetrate this thickness, rupture fuel tanks, damage engine mounts, break track assemblies, or crack hull welds. Multiple dog hits in a confined area, a road, a valley, an approach between hills, create a cumulative effect. The first disabled vehicle slows the column. The second creates a jam. The third may block the route entirely, forcing the German force to halt and attempt recovery under fire. Soviet artillery, already registered on likely approach routes, concentrates fire on the stalled formation. Soviet infantry move forward to engage with anti-tank grenades and Molotov cocktails. What begins as a breakthrough becomes a killing zone. The original reports likely do not specify the breakdown between tanks completely destroyed, crew killed, vehicle burned out, and tanks temporarily disabled, track broken, fuel tank ruptured, but reparable. Wartime reporting often uses destroyed generically to mean removed from combat. Modern historians are careful to distinguish. For this analysis, disabled is more accurate. 12 German armored vehicles were removed from the action at Tamarovka, Bykovo due to dogmine hits, possibly supplemented by other damage sources. The archival element is the key sentence from post-war Soviet summaries. 16 dogs destroyed 12 tanks that had broken through into the depth of the Soviet defenses in the area of Tamarovka, Bykovo, Hill 244.5. The sentence structure is passive and factual, typical of General Staff historical writing. No heroic embellishment, no individual names, no dramatic narrative, just the numbers and the outcome. The cause and effect chain is direct. This action, while tactically local, contributes to arresting a specific German thrust in the 6th Guards Army sector. The Germans do not achieve breakthrough in this area. Soviet forces hold their positions, stabilize the line, and prevent further penetration. The anti-tank dog platoon plays a role in this outcome, though quantifying its exact contribution against all other defensive factors, artillery, mines, infantry resistance, is impossible from summary documents alone. The larger context matters. At Kursk overall, hundreds of German tanks and assault guns are destroyed or disabled across 2 weeks of fighting. Soviet losses in armor are even higher. The battle involves roughly 6,000 tanks and assault guns combined, making it the largest armored engagement in history. Within this vast mechanical slaughter, 12 German vehicles stopped by 16 dogs represent a tiny fraction, roughly 0.2% of total German armor committed, and a far smaller percentage of total losses. Yet those 12 tanks appear in General Staff summaries. Someone thought the action significant enough to record numerically and include in official battle histories. The Tamarovka-Bykovo engagement stands as one of very few anti-tank dog actions with specific, named claims that enter the archival record. Most dog unit references are generic. This one has numbers, locations, and apparent verification. In a battle fought by thousands of tanks over hundreds of square kilometers, 16 dogs and 12 vehicle kills should be statistically irrelevant. Yet this action becomes central to the anti-tank dog narrative precisely because it provides what the rest of the program lacks: a documented, numerically precise success claim in a major battle. The question is whether one successful platoon-level engagement justifies an entire weapons program, or whether it merely proves that even failed systems can occasionally work under ideal conditions. The film shows contrasting sources side by side. On the left, Soviet popular articles from the 1970s and 80s emphasizing heroic tank destroyer dogs. On the right, Western Cold War analyses questioning the 300-tank figure. In the center, modern Russian and international historians working from declassified archives, presenting revised estimates. The visual contrast illustrates historiographic evolution: initial propaganda, skeptical revision, and eventual archival-based reassessment. The popular narrative, repeated in Soviet commemorative literature and uncritically adopted by some Western sources, includes a specific claim about Kursk. Dogs frequently ran back toward Soviet tanks because they recognized diesel exhaust from T-34 and KV models used in training, and so blew up their own side instead of German gasoline-powered panzers. The story has psychological appeal. It explains program failure through a single technical oversight, implies Soviet incompetence, and provides a dramatic irony. The documentary reality is more complex. Wartime reports clearly record early war incidents, summer and autumn 1941, of dogs returning to Soviet trenches and detonating among friendly troops. These events are described in multiple after-action summaries and lead to the controversial order authorizing handlers to shoot returning dogs. But these reports predate Kursk by 2 years and do not attribute the returns specifically to diesel versus gasoline confusion. Modern archival-based work, including analyses by military history visualized and other researchers using Soviet and German combat records, classifies many sweeping claims about diesel smell as unsubstantiated or exaggerated. The technical argument has surface plausibility. Soviet tanks do use diesel engines, German tanks mostly use gasoline, and dogs have excellent olfactory discrimination. But the 1942 instructions focus on behavioral conditioning, running toward noise, vibration, and large metal shapes, not on scent training. No primary Soviet directive links training methodology explicitly to fuel type. The diesel explanation appears to be a post hoc rationalization, possibly originating in German propaganda or later Cold War commentary, that provides a simple explanation for complex failures. Technical clarification confirms the fuel difference. Soviet T-34 medium tanks and KV heavy tanks use V2 diesel engines. German Panzer III and IV tanks use Maybach gasoline engines. The Ferdinand assault gun uses 2 Maybach gasoline engines. Only a few German vehicles, some captured Soviet tanks used by Germany, and later Panther models tested with alternative power plants, have diesel propulsion. The vast majority of German armor at Kursk runs on gasoline. The question is whether this matters tactically. If dogs are conditioned to noise and shape, fuel smell should be secondary. If dogs are desperately hungry and trained to associate tanks with food, they should approach any tank. If dogs panic under fire, they flee regardless of what fuel the nearest vehicle burns. The diesel explanation oversimplifies a weapons system that failed for multiple reasons: inadequate conditioning, unrealistic training environments, battlefield stress, handler errors, and fundamental design flaws in treating animals as guided missiles. A modern synthesis states the historiographic consensus. Soviet sources claimed 300 tanks destroyed, but this number is considered exaggerated by many historians. Some isolated successes, however, are documented. Kharkiv, Stalingrad, and Kursk. The sentence captures the careful middle ground. The 300 figure is rejected, but documented successes are acknowledged. The challenge is the gap between 300 and the countable verified claims. Possibly 50 across the entire war, maybe fewer. The cause and effect shows how legends form. A small, real pattern, documented friendly fire incidents early in the war, plus a few confirmed successes like Tamarovka, Bykovo, evolves into a broad narrative that is easy to retell but difficult to substantiate numerically. The diesel explanation is repeated because it is memorable and plausible, not because it appears in contemporary Soviet documents. The 300 tank claim is repeated because it validates the program and honors sacrifice, not because it can be tied to specific dates, units, and German loss records. The final question reframes the entire program. When measured against verifiable data, did anti-tank dogs matter more as a physical anti-tank weapon, accounting for perhaps 50 enemy vehicles across 4 years of war, or as an idea that changed behavior and left a moral and psychological legacy? The physical contribution is marginal. The psychological impact is measurable. German standing orders to shoot all dogs, altered German tactical behavior around villages, Soviet moral questions about sacrificing animals, and a lasting historical debate about desperation versus ingenuity. The anti-tank dog program represents an extreme case of improvisation under pressure. It demonstrates what total war can drive nations to attempt: turning domestic animals into weapons, accepting high failure rates and friendly fire risks, and continuing programs long after initial failures because alternatives are scarce. It also demonstrates the limits of improvisation. Cheap, low-tech solutions rarely outperform engineered weapons systems, and moral costs accumulate regardless of tactical results. The legacy is complex. Soviet post-war military literature treats anti-tank dogs with respect but notes their obsolescence. Western Cold War analysis uses them as evidence of Soviet backwardness and cruelty. Modern scholarship tries to balance documented facts against propaganda from all sides. The Volgograd Monument honors the dogs. The archives record their limited impact. Both things are true. History contains multitudes. A historian's table appears on screen. Column 1. Total German tank and assault gun losses on the Eastern Front. Approximately 25,000 to 30,000 vehicles destroyed or permanently disabled across 4 years. Column 2. Estimated German losses at Kursk specifically, roughly 1,500 vehicles destroyed or disabled, though exact figures remain debated. Column 3. Dog-related losses based on Soviet claims, 300 tanks. Column 4. Dog-related losses based on modern archival estimates, 50 tanks maximum, possibly fewer. The contrast between 350 is not subtle. One figure suggests meaningful battlefield impact. 300 tanks represent several armored battalions, enough to affect divisional-level operations. 50 tanks spread across 4 years represents a minor exotic footnote, roughly equivalent to one bad day for a German tank regiment. Detailed archival work supports the lower estimate. The documented cases with specific numerical claims and named locations remain few. Kharkiv with 5 tanks, Stalingrad airfield with 13, Tamarovka, Bykovo with 12. A handful of other actions mention dog units without providing numbers. Some reports credit individual kills, 1 tank here, 2 there. Adding all verifiable and probable claims reaches perhaps 50, maybe 70 at the absolute maximum if every ambiguous report is counted generously. 300 appears in Soviet popular accounts and some post-war publications as though it were well documented. Modern researchers find no primary sources supporting this figure. It likely represents cumulative exaggeration. Initial reports inflate numbers modestly, subsequent retellings amplify the inflation, commemorative literature adopts the highest figures, and eventually 300 becomes the accepted number despite lacking documentary foundation. The physical impact, measured strictly by numbers, is marginal. 50 German tanks across 4 years of Eastern Front operations, where annual German losses often exceeded 5,000 vehicles, is negligible. No German operational plan was disrupted by dog mine casualties. No German offensive failed because dogs destroyed critical armor. The direct battlefield contribution is minimal. The psychological and doctrinal impact is more significant. German orders to shoot dogs on sight represent a real behavioral change. Frontline soldiers must now scan for and engage small animals, adding cognitive load and ammunition expenditure. Tank crews experience low-level anxiety around villages and farms where dogs are present. The cost is not measurable in destroyed panzers but in mental energy, tactical caution, and resource allocation. The Soviet side experiences psychological effects too. Handlers forced to shoot returning dogs suffer moral injury. Units assigned anti-tank dogs face reduced morale and higher transfer rates. The program becomes unpopular. Post-war Soviet literature addresses it with respect but also with distance, acknowledging the innovation while noting its limitations. One Psychology Today summary captures the assessment. How efficient these dogs were is a matter of some controversy. The sentence is diplomatic but clear. Efficiency remains disputed, suggesting the answer is not very. The article continues by noting documented isolated successes against the broader context of exaggerated claims. The cause and effect, measured over the full scope of the war, argues that mine dogs contributed marginally to physical German tank losses but had an outsized role in shaping certain frontline behaviors and in later narratives about Soviet desperation and ingenuity. The program matters more as a symbol than as a weapon. It represents total war's logic pushed to ethical boundaries. It shows what nations attempt under existential threat. It demonstrates both Soviet improvisation and the limits of that improvisation. How should this small, controversial program be remembered? As a technical curiosity that failed tactically but succeeded psychologically? As a symbol of sacrifice that honors animals pressed into war service? As a case study in the ethical limits of weaponization? Or as all three simultaneously, because history contains contradictions that cannot be resolved into simple narratives? Footage of the Volgograd monument appears. The memorial, erected in 2011, shows a German shepherd in alert stance, facing forward. The inscription reads, "To the destroyers of fascist tanks. Battle of Stalingrad 1942 through 1943, the monument stands in a small park. Visitors leave flowers. Photographs show veterans and schoolchildren at memorial ceremonies. The monument represents public memory in simplified, heroic form. Dogs destroyed fascist tanks at Stalingrad. The statement is factually supportable. Senior Sergeant Kryakov's group did engage German armor near Stalingrad airfield. Soviet sources credit 13 kills. The action happened. But the monument makes no mention of friendly fire casualties, training failures, high dog mortality rates, or the moral complexities of turning animals into suicide weapons. Public memory prefers clarity to complexity. Archival material reveals a more layered reality. Tens of thousands of dogs perform essential support roles throughout the war. Mine detection saves uncounted Soviet lives. Messenger dogs maintain communications in broken terrain. Transport dogs move supplies in roadless forests and winter conditions. Sentry dogs guard depots and headquarters. These roles are unambiguous successes. Anti-tank dogs represent a small, separate program with mixed results. A real but limited number of demonstrable successes, recurring friendly fire risks, and persistent training and operational problems. Comparative context adds perspective. Other countries experimented with explosive or demolition dogs in World War II. The United States tested similar concepts and canceled such programs for safety and ethical reasons. The Soviet Union deployed anti-tank dogs operationally, experienced real-world failures and limited successes, but continued the program longer than most Western militaries would have accepted. The difference reflects wartime circumstances. The Soviet Union faced existential invasion, controlled vast resources including millions of dogs, and operated under a political system that could impose controversial programs despite unpopularity. Ethical framing is unavoidable. Modern sensibilities recoil from the concept of training animals to commit suicide as weapons. The 1940s Soviet perspective differed. Total war against an enemy pursuing genocidal occupation justified extreme measures. Dogs were expendable resources like ammunition, and human lives took absolute priority. Neither perspective is simply right or wrong. They reflect different historical contexts and value systems. A historian's assessment, drawing on modern commentary, provides professional consensus. Soviet claims of 300 destroyed tanks are almost certainly exaggerated, but isolated actions like Khlukov, Stalingrad, and Tamarovka, Bykovo, plus German countermeasures, confirm some real tactical and psychological effects. The sentence balances skepticism about the myth with respect for documented facts. It neither dismisses the program entirely nor accepts inflated claims. It occupies the careful middle ground that scholarship requires. The cause and effect connects the anti-tank dog program to broader dynamics of industrial war. Total mobilization drives rapid improvisation under pressure. The search for low-cost solutions leads to experiments that would be rejected in peacetime. The moral limits of turning animals into expendable weapons are reached and crossed. Industrial capacity eventually provides better answers. More anti-tank guns, improved ammunition, handheld-shaped charges. The exotic improvisation becomes obsolete. The final factual line brings the analysis back to Kursk. At Kursk, roughly 6,000 tanks and assault guns fought across 2 weeks in summer 1943. Soviet and German records count hundreds of armored vehicles destroyed or disabled by all causes. Guns, mines, air attack, mechanical failure, crew error. Only 16 dogs appear in general staff summaries as responsible for 12 of those tanks in one small sector of one army's zone. The ratio defines the reality. 6,000 vehicles in the battle, 12 credited to dogs. The dogs are a footnote in the largest tank battle in history. But footnotes matter. They show what was attempted, what succeeded partially, what failed, and what people remember. The anti-tank dog program was a small, desperate experiment in a conflict decided primarily by factories, logistics, and human manpower. It represents one data point in the vast dataset of total war, the willingness to try anything, the limits of improvisation, and the ethical costs of survival. The 16 dogs at Tamarovka and Bykovo disabled 12 German tanks, gave the monument in Volgograd its factual basis, and left a statistical reminder that even in industrial war, small desperate measures sometimes work. What is your perspective on this part of history? Share your thoughts in the comments, because every memory and reflection helps keep the past alive.